Okay, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to take this throttle body injection. This cut is 194.50. This is what you saw in the last video. This is the flows that we had. These on the left here. That's what that port was producing. This looks all fuzzy. There we go. And now we're going to take a look at the intake manifolds we flowed them through. Okay, this is the stocker that you've seen before. Let's take a quick look at the ports. Okay, you can see rust and stuff because they were filled with water for who knows how long. But you can see the real sharp edges, the bad shaping. Notice how the floor is wider than the roof. Notice all the casting marks and stuff that's inside the stocker. And the notches that we have on several runners that don't make any sense to me at all. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take just the cylinder head flows. We're going to put the stock intake on it with the slightly modified throttle body and see what we get. Well, no surprise, they're all minuses, okay? And they do take a pretty decent hit everywhere, okay? To be expected. You realize we're still using the same amount of vacuum, 28 inches of vacuum, but instead of just going across a port, you're going across a throttle body, an intake manifold plenum, intake manifold runner, intake port runner, and the valve assembly going in through the chamber and then down the bore. So you're sharing that 28 inches through all those components, so obviously it's not going to flow as much. Is it horrible? It's not horrible when you consider what it was designed for, right? As a matter of fact, I looked up a couple things, and then Stan sent me something. I'm going to try to remember to put that into this video, as far as how many pounds the stock injectors were. And it seems like, obviously, the 4.3 liter, the 5 liter, the 5.7, and the 7.4 liter all had different injectors, which makes sense. So we can go through that, and we can talk about what the original 350 had and how much power it was designed to make, and we can figure that out if I don't get off task too much. Take a look at our swirl. Minus, plus. This had a minus 350 here, right? Minus. All right. With a decent-sized street cam, you're only 1,600 and change through the intake manifold. Which runner was I using for this? I didn't mark it. Let me figure that out for you guys. Okay, that would have been runner number 4, which is a lower H, which should flow better than the upper H. Okay, lower H on the stocker. You can see it's got a really sharp turn on the right, and then it's bent around the wrong way. Okay, and it goes crisscrossed over to the other side. Basically, the port is shaped to make an easy to put together pattern. I don't think they used any airflow technology at all when they designed these intakes. They're just terrible. Okay, our next flow is my open plenum throttle body injection manifold. It looks like I started it and never finished it. When you machine out this inside here, this will need welding. You can see there's some welding. I don't remember if I MIG'd this or TIG'd this, but in any case, it's not my usual quality. I can't tell you how many years ago I did this, but it looks like I started it and I lost interest in it. How unusual. But I was able to get, a decent radius once you get in there and do it. I can still see you got a sharp edge here. It's not completely finished, obviously. And to be honest, I don't remember whether I welded those notches in the ports. Let's flip this over and see what it looks like. Okay, you can see definitely not, Charlie's usual quality. It's all ridges up and down, bumps, lumps. I didn't weld it. Let's see what the other ones look like. Okay, let's move this light a little bit. See if we can see something. Not great. But in any case, it's really... Looks like I hit it with a really rough burr. I took some of the junk off of it, and I left it all jaggedy. All right, pretty ugly. Pretty ugly everywhere we look. Let's see if it was a better improvement. Remember, it's an open plenum, so she can suck through both barrels on the throttle body. Let's see if it made any difference on our flow sheet. Okay, same cut, stock intake versus the open plenum intake. Was it any better? Well, we did get pluses everywhere. The pluses are not huge, even at street lifts. Not a huge difference, but you also saw the quality of the work I did on it. It could definitely use some more work, no doubt about it. I didn't realize it was that bad before I measured it. Doesn't matter. It's old work. I'm going to see if it made any difference at all. And it did. It picked up, so it would be worth a little power. Now, would the open plenum knock our low-end torque back? I would think it would. But remember, this completely stock throttle body injection still had a notch between the two plenums, between the two barrels. So I don't think it would make that big a difference. I know they used to sell spacers that did the same type of thing. They were supposed to help. I don't know if they did. I would think, sharing barrels is going to help, especially when they're as tight as these throttle bodies are. I only think they used to flow about 500, these throttle bodies. If someone knows exactly what they flow, you can let us know. How'd we do as far as swirl? Well, it's going to change a little bit because it's going through a curved runner, right? So we've got equals, plus, 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 plus. I'll take it out of street lift. We went from 1667 to 1764. Step in the right direction. I'd rather have 1764 than 1600. Okay, nothing great. Let's take a look at our next intake manifold, and we're going to flow that through two different runners. Okay, this is an interesting piece. This is my David Vizard Brzezinski copy, original throttle body intake that came on my 88 truck. Some of the things it's had done to it. Well, the barrels have been opening up to 2-inch, and you can see they just barely do it. In fact, I wound up having a crack in the plenum where it broke through to the EGR. I put some epoxy on it. You can see I went to scrape it off at one point. It was on there pretty good. This manifold has got quite a few miles on it the way it sits. This was used for a long period of time with the 2-barrel. It was probably almost 3 decades ago. So some of my work is not what you guys are used to seeing. How far off the deep end did I go with this manifold? Insane. My buddy that owned a machine shop at the time is like, dude, you did so much welding to that manifold, it'll never work on a car because it's going to be so bent. Well, I did a fairly decent job as far as welding it because it did seal and it didn't leak. But yeah, this had quite a bit of welding done to it. These actually had like a 2-inch hole drilled in them, and then the runner, which comes this way. You know what? I'm going to draw it in with a marker if I can find a decent marker. Okay, on top, our plenum is curved something like this. Okay, the runners come into this square branch. So what I did is I drilled a hole and I welded in a divider here to give it an easier radius to turn into the port. Well, I didn't stop there. As you can see, there's a big chunk of weld here where I gave it some more of a turning radius because the stock shape of this manifold is turned the wrong way. Same thing on this one here. It's turned the wrong way. Now, I was smart enough back whenever I did this to know that the upper H has more problems than the lower H. So this work was not done to the lower H. It was done only to the upper H to try to even them out a little bit. Notice I didn't weld in my notch through the plenum. I wanted it to share the barrels the way it was designed. I did have a Holley 2-inch throttle body on this, and it worked quite well. It flowed, that flowed 670. And of course it was modified, so it probably flowed more than 670. This was actually a really good running setup. Some of the stuff we did on the other side. Let me do the marker on the other side. Why not? Okay, another thing that was interesting is I knew back then this was the worst flowing runner. I don't remember how I knew, but I did. And the stock one has like a big edge right here. Let's take a quick look at the stock one, what it looks like. Okay, you see that big point right there? Let's see if we can get that relatively focused, and I'll try to get that big dual plane in same frame. Okay, you can see how much weld I filled in. And then, of course, I drilled a 2-inch hole here. I welded in my divider here. And this plenum, well, this runner, I should say, this was moved quite a bit over. Let me draw that in. All right, it's kind of a scribbled mess, but instead of it being turned real sharp here, this whole thing was widened. I don't remember how much I was able to widen it. Probably not that much, because I don't know how much aluminum was in there. I don't remember welding inside. Remember, I had a hole here to work through. But the idea was to give it a much broader radius to feed this bad cylinder. Okay, cylinder number 5, you can see, has had a large amount of weld put on this side to give the runner a better turn, because it's also turned the wrong direction. 8 is actually turned the right direction, but due to this sharp corner here, it was always a crummy flowing port. Okay, now this is runner number 2. Let me check. Okay, it is runner number 2. You can see the piece welded in there. You can just see a piece of the divider. You know, it looks like the very top of that divider got banged off when I was using the burr. In any case, it's pretty ugly looking, but you can see on the inside edge there, I moved that over quite a bit. Let's take a look at a couple of these. Okay, number 4 is a lower H. Yeah, I actually welded those holes closed, right? I could see 2 had a hole. And both of these are filled as well. I filled those holes with weld. I gave this a little bit of a shape. It's tough to do because it's bent the wrong way. It's still got an extremely rough texture. I was doing rough textures even all the way back in the 80s. Sorry, a little tough to get lighting in there, but you can see the hole drilled in the top H. The divider that's welded in. That divider was actually quite big because I did so much work to that upper plenum in the back. And it seems to have worked. I remember this running really well. As ugly as it looks. Remember, air really doesn't care a lot, does it? Doesn't care what it looks like. Notice the difference between how wide the roof of that port is versus the floor of that port. Interesting the way they did that. All right, my gasket match has a little bit to be desired. This one, it's a lower H, so you can't do that much without cutting it open. I decided not to drill because it had this huge water passage. So in order to do that, I would have to close up these water passages and do all kinds of plumbing. I wasn't interested in doing that, and I knew the bottom H flowed better, so I just did what I could get to and sent it. Okay, that's some pretty ugly welding, but it did work. You could still see a bunch of slag in there all the way. That's on... Where is that? That's hard to see for me. I guess that's the wall of the other side. Tough to get to after it's all welded up. Can't get to it. So those had to stay. It was an experiment, but you can see it was brought out a lot more. Let me see if I can get some light on that side. Yeah, really tough because you got like a shadow on it. But you can see the divider and how much more that wall was brought out on the left. Okay, this is probably our best looking upper runner as far as welding and everything looks. A little rough. Now, I wasn't afraid to use a really rough texture on the walls because I knew about the liquid issues with the throttle body injection. So this wasn't designed to be smooth. And like I said, I remember running this, and I had good plug color on all the plugs back in the day. So no exaggeration, I wouldn't doubt this manifold having 100 hours worth of work into it. It's just craziness. Now, what can I say I learned from doing these couple manifolds? Well, you got to remember when I was doing this, I was broke. I had access to a welding machine. I had access to grinders. So I did what I could do, trying to get the max out of what I had. What would I do today? I would move up to a different design intake. If I had to run a 2-barrel throttle body, I'd probably just bolt it on either. Holly used to make a nice projection intake manifold. These barrels were actually moved forward a little bit, and then it had a nice big plenum on it. That was actually a pretty nice manifold. Edelbrock made a throttle body injection, but I think it had tiny barrels. I think it had stock size barrels on it. So you needed an adapter if you're going to run a 2-inch throttle body. In reality, you could use something like a Performer or a Performer air gap with the plate that has the throttle body, and just use that as that adapter and bolt it right on. You're better off with the bigger plenum. These plenum, this has had a huge amount of work. I didn't even show you guys this plenum actually looks pretty good. Okay, I didn't show you this. Except for notice how thin we are on that EGR. You can actually see that crack on that wall. It only goes into the EGR though, so it was no problem driving it around. I remember I put epoxy on it to make it look prettier. Like it matters when it's in the engine, right? That's how whacked out I was. And this one, it's tough to even get a good radius on it because the EGR is so close to the bottom of the barrel. Yeah, you're much better probably running a modern 4-barrel intake with a spacer that bolts the throttle body up to it. The only thing that's really nice about this is it had extra bolt holes for the brackets and things. Little stuff like that makes a difference, right? I think the air conditioning bolted on this side. A lot of the aftermarket may not have all those extra bolts. This also had extra bolts in the front where the serpentine hooked up to. And I wasn't going to mess with all that stuff. So it also has a rear water outlet. A lot of aftermarkets don't have that. That goes to the heater core. So that's probably one of the reasons, many of the reasons I use the stock junk. Think about all those things before you waste any time improving these. I didn't show you the flows from this intake yet. Oof, we're 18 minutes in. Let's show those flows quick and get this done. Okay, I forgot to mark that this was the open plenum on the number 4 runner, which is lower H. Okay, that's this one. So she's coming through this barrel and then going through basically stock runners. So the only difference is this has got a bigger barrel. Unfortunately, I'm stuck with the smaller throttle body. Okay. Now the open plenum one is only designed for the smaller throttle body. This is designed for the bigger throttle body. So we're kind of saddling it with a smaller throttle body. That's all I have. I don't have a 2-inch throttle body left anymore. So we'll take a look. We'll compare these runners with the open plenum, sharing the barrels, versus the dual plenum with only the notch in the plenum, modified runners. Now remember, it's lower H, so it doesn't have all the fancy welding and stuff on it. Let's see how it did. Minus, minus, plus, minus, minus, plus, minus, minus, minus. It's kind of a loser against this, because this has got access to both barrels, I would think, more than anything else. Now, it does have those notches welded. These have the notches still there, okay? How about our swirl? Equals, equals, plus, 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 minus, 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 plus, minus, plus. It's hit or miss. And where we're going to be operating, 1850 to 1764. Okay. I'll probably take a little bit more. Okay, now we take this. We'll take these numbers and we'll go against the upper H. Now remember, the upper H has had a lot more work done to it. So let's see how those go as far as pluses and minuses. Okay, these are measured on the number 5 runner, which has had metal added here. It's had the divider added here, and I probably moved this runner over as much as I could ages ago, going through the bigger plenum. Let's see how that one did. Let's see if it was worth all the effort, because that was a huge amount of effort. So it's these numbers versus these numbers. Remember, it's still saddled with the smaller throttle body. So how'd we do? Equals, minus, plus, 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 plus. Huge pluses? Not really. At 500, we go 181, 177.6. They're not huge. It's not a huge difference. But remember, this is also seeing one barrel of the smaller throttle body and that notch in the plenum. This has got access to both barrels. Okay, as far as our swirls, right, it's going to be these numbers compared to these numbers. This is the good intake, right, the good dual plane intake that was cut for the bigger barrels. How'd we do as far as our swirl? Well, 0, 0, I should say equals, equals, minus, plus, 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 plus in the middle, minus, minus, plus. And let's see what we got. At 500, we're 1764 here. At 500 here, we're 21. Oh, I'll take this one. Is it worth all the extra work and effort I did to it? Probably not. Remember, part of the idea was to balance these balance these flows from the higher port to the lower H ports. Was I successful in that? I actually made the upper H flow better than the lower H. Now the lower H are smaller, but they flow better due to the larger plenum that's feeding it. It's interesting. I've been into manifold design for a very long time, guys. Was it a successful experiment? Yeah, it ran good. It ran way better than the stocker ran. I remember doing all that work and then talking to my buddy Nicky, and he was just like, dude, you have issues. Oh, he was a good guy. He's still around somewhere. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. My daughter Carla did a bunch of work to the YouTube site. All these throttle body injection manifold and cylinder heads, they'll all be grouped together as a... I forget. But they're all together. You can just hit from one to the other, series. A series that very few people will watch. But, hey, got to do what keeps you entertained, right? All right, guys. Let me know if you want me to fiddle with these anymore. Show anything different with them. As of right now, I think I will do maybe one. Somebody's asking for me to hack that vein completely out of our big port. I may do one other cut before I hack that whole vein out. I may do, like, right now we're almost at 3 o'clock. I may make it like 4 o'clock and try that. And then I would do one maybe at 6 o'clock, and then I might take it whole completely out. It depends. So, thanks for hanging out, guys. Have a good night.